Welcome to the Level Up with Josh Pratt podcast, where you're invited to learn from my remarkable guest and lead a purpose-driven life. Hey guys, welcome to the Level Up podcast. I'm your host, Josh Pratt. I'm here with Vinney Tolman. Vinney is a great man. I've had the opportunity to read his book. It is called The Light After Death. I just plowed through this book. There was just truth bomb after truth bomb. And Vinney, for those of us that maybe don't know your story, would you mind sharing maybe the first little part about your book, maybe the first couple of chapters, then we can dive into the ensuing chapters after that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So back in the day, this is back in 2003, I was in the amateur bodybuilding industry and took a fairly new supplement. And it happened to be that the supplement that I got a hold of was quite a bit stronger than the normal one that we were used to getting a hold of. And we took our normal dose, me and my best friend at the time. And both of us, we realized quite right away it was toxic. And we thought, hey, we'll go get something to eat and maybe feel better if we go get something to eat. So we, went down the street a couple blocks down from his place and popped into a Dairy Queen. I made it in and I felt just completely nauseated. So I went straight for the bathroom. Meanwhile, my buddy went in, he collapsed on the first booth that you could come to as soon as you walked in the restaurant. While he was on the first booth, he began to vomit. And as he vomited, the manager saw that. He called emergency services. They hauled him away in an ambulance, and he ended up being just fine. But as far as me, I ended up going in that bathroom and doing the same thing, but I had passed out on my back. So I had fallen on my back, and when you vomit and you're laying on your back, you suffocate yourself, you aspirate, and that's what ended up happening to me. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting in what feels like a movie theater. It feels like I'm sitting in like a movie theater seat, and I'm watching everything from above, like literally as if someone's panning the shot from above, from the ceiling looking down. And I was watching them haul away my buddy in an ambulance, and I was watching nobody find this dead body. And I felt bad for the body. I felt bad for whoever was going to find him. And finally, after about 45 minutes or so, they found the body. They called emergency services a second time, and a second crew showed up. With this crew, it was a 3-man crew. They had 2 veteran medics and 1 rookie medic. And the whole time that they were trying to resuscitate the body, the rookie was feeling like they weren't doing enough. He wanted to do more. And they kept, kind of shutting him down, saying, you don't know how to do this job yet. You're brand new. And so they sequestered him to the back of the ambulance, where he was supposed to babysit the body inside the body bag. And while he was back there, just kind of staring at that body, he kept having these thoughts like, why am I here if I'm not able to make a difference? And he started to glow around his heart. And shortly after he started to glow, then this message got delivered to him that this one's not dead. And he heard it. He definitely heard it. But he didn't do anything about it. He felt like maybe it was his imagination. And then a second time, he started to glow, and even brighter this time. And on the second time, it was even louder. It was a very loud message. This one's not dead. That was enough for him to begin the process of trying to, check the body. And as he was checking the body, he felt something on the inner thigh, down where the big femur artery or femoral artery is. And when he felt that twinge or that shock or spark, he felt like that was enough for him to go ahead and try to resuscitate the body. He was able to.
Just real quick, just for our listeners. So when they got you, when the paramedics got you, your body was at 78 degrees, I think it was, like cold to the touch.
They had it. It was cold to the touch. They had recorded a topical temperature. They had one of these, tape on type thermometer things that they taped on, and they knew topical temperature. It was in the high 70 degrees, just below 80 degrees. So the body had cooled a bit by then, for sure. Now this was winter, and the tile floor was really cold because the restaurant had just opened. So all night long that tile was cooling with no heat on it. So that helped things actually. The fact that that tile was so cold, it helped get the body cooled off very quickly.
Interesting. Wow. That's what we call tender mercies, right? Just very
Yeah.
special,
And there
specific
was a
blessing.
and yeah, there was a few more too. Like right as soon as he got the heart started, one of the tender mercies was they were half a block away from a hospital.
Hmm.
So they were almost to a hospital when the heart got started, and so they were able to immediately turn the body into a medical team, a trauma team that was there ready to meet it. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, sorry. So you're kind of seeing all this unfold. Your spirit has left your body. You're at this Dairy Queen, you vomit, aspirate, die. You're laying on the floor. You're back in the paramedic or ambulance. And this newbie paramedic, I'll let you kind of talk a little bit more about how he goes to resuscitate you.
So he went once he felt like that spark on the inner leg, he went ahead and he forced oxygen into the lungs, and then he hooked up a defib machine. And a defib machine is something that shocks the body to bring the heart around. And nothing happened on the first round of shocks, nothing. And on the second round of shocks, they did get one heartbeat. And then on the third round of shocks, they got a steady, faint heartbeat.
Hmm.
And at that point, they had a body that was now alive, that had just been dead. So there's certain protocols, there's certain things you do for someone who's in that position or in that condition. And so they were able to hand the body directly over to a team to start doing those things.
Very good. And we didn't even really touch on the fact that the people, the employees at Dairy Queen, they see you, you're able to see them like calling 911, and you see the manager on the phone. He's like, it sounds like he's not wanting to touch you, but he's telling his coworker,
Yeah,
go
he
ahead
was
and
telling,
you do
yeah,
it.
he was telling like the 16-year-old girl who was an assistant manager. He was
Oh,
telling
poor
her
girl.
well, she was probably 18, but still she looked really young. And he was telling her, hey, they're telling you to put your hand on the neck. And she's like, oh, it's all wet and it's cold and yeah,
Vomit.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it
That
was not
girl
a pretty
deserved a
scene.
raise. She deserved a raise after
Yes,
that day.
yes. And you know what's funny? I went back to the restaurant. I never did see the manager of the restaurant again. Never saw anybody that was working there ever again.
They quit after
Um,
that day. It makes
well, I
sense.
went back. I went back to tell him, hey, just so you guys know, I survived. That I'm not gone. I was worried that there was maybe some trauma there for them,
Sure.
and they didn't work there anymore. So
Oh
so
man.
hopefully one day they find the story and they can read it for themselves.
They're like, hey, this $7 an hour, this isn't worth it. I'm sorry, we're out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Just kidding. Okay. So you get to the hospital again, kind of this God grin moment that this newbie who is like getting chastised by the two paramedics in the front seat. They're like, what are you doing? Right? Like, you can't do that. You're gonna get fired. The guy's gone. And he well, on that note, like in your book, you talk about frequency, right? Like some of us are on this lower frequency here on this earth, and others are more astute to listening to the Holy Spirit, or to God, or
Hmm.
their gut, their intuition, the light of Christ, whatever you want to call it. Do you know anything about the life of that paramedic that saved your life? Like what he
I
was?
do. So I sought him out specifically. He was actually kind of hard to get a hold of. The ambulatory company that sent me the bill for reviving me and bringing me to the hospital. Even though it was only a couple of blocks, it was a quite extensive bill just for bringing you a couple blocks. So
It's the
I
most
reached out to them.
expensive taxi
Yeah,
ride
it
of your
was
life.
super expensive, more than Manhattan, that's for
Where
sure.
where's Uber when you need it, right? Uber
I
Medical.
know. So I reached out to the company. They would not give me his name. I could get his first name, last initial from the paperwork.
Okay.
So I had that already. And it was weird because the worksheet only has a place for two names, and they had to write in his name as the third name on that worksheet. I got a copy of that from the ambulatory company, and then from that, calling around, and I just kept calling, asking for that guy. I finally got a hold of him, and I was able to talk to him and say, "Hey, I was the one that you brought back to life. Can I take you to lunch? Can I do this? Can I do that?" And he's like, "No, we can have lunch, but I'm not even going to let you buy me lunch. We'll just go grab some lunch." And he thought, you know what, that may help me too, because he was still a bit traumatized by it all.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I wanted to ask him, I'm like, "Man, did you know you were glowing? Like, I actually heard God's voice tell you that I wasn't dead." And he's like, "I don't know about that. I just knew." He said it was just like a gut instinct. In his gut, he knew I wasn't all the way gone.
Hmm.
And whether it was the actual voice or his gut instinct, I don't know. But what I perceived was for sure a loud, audible voice. Essentially connecting to him and to me that this one's not dead. Yeah.
Wow, I mean, your whole story is remarkable, but just if it ended kind of there, where it's like, and you were revived, but you saw this light glowing in this guy's bosom, and then it suddenly, and he kind of dismisses it, but then it gets bigger and kind of gets in front of him completely. I mean, even that alone, like, is remarkable. Okay, so we continue on. We're at the hospital.
So while they're transferring the body from the EMT gurney or the ambulatory gurney, they're transferring it to the hospital gurney. And as they did, the body went into some seizures, and it was like convulsing. So they had to strap it down. They had to restrain it. And they restrained the legs, no problem. They restrained the right arm, no problem. But when they went to restrain the left arm, I actually felt someone restraining me on my left side. And that was odd for me, really odd for me. So I looked down for my left arm, and I actually saw the strap that they were using to strap down the body, and I broke it. I like resisted it and broke it. Then they had to come back and put another strap on, a bigger strap. But that was very surreal, because up until that point, I didn't know that I was dead.
It was because all of your bodybuilding, these straps couldn't hold you down.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't know if it was the momentum of me resisting or what, but I got through that first strap. They did have to come back with a bigger strap and get me
Yeah.
down.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the first inkling that what I'd been watching was my own death. And the next thing I thought was, "You're an idiot. How could you not know this was you?" I really thought that, like, to the deepest part of my soul, like, how could I be so dumb not to know that this was my own body? And that was quite a realization. It was kind of rough for me to get that. Yeah.
Interesting. And you had a similar experience, or maybe exact same experience, where Rob, he's there in the Dairy Queen, and he's, having his issues, right? From the weight loss supplement, or pre-workout supplement, whatever it was. And then you didn't realize that it was Rob. You just realized it was this individual having a
No,
hard time.
I actually realized it was him.
Oh, did
And
you?
it's weird, but where I was, I knew it was him, and I knew that he was going to be okay. As soon as he went away, there was like this all-knowing sense that he was going to be just fine.
Hmm.
And of course, he ended up being just fine.
Yeah.
But with the other body, I didn't know, and I didn't know it was me. Well,
Hmm.
because even though it looked like me, it couldn't be possibly me, because me was up here watching everything.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that
It
your
would
spirit, you're
it would be almost like you're looking in the mirror, and your mirror image goes and starts doing things that you're not doing. You would automatically think, "Oh, this is a trick. This is like a movie or something. It's not real." Because if it was me, it would be matching what I do, right? So even in mirror imagery, it's hard to explain. It's the whole experience is really hard to explain, because it's beyond what words can describe.
Yeah. Well, whatever it was you just said, you got a thumb. There's like a bubble little thumbs up. So There was like, do you know what I'm talking about? No, there was like an
No.
image on your. Okay, we'll just keep moving forward. Maybe I'm seeing. Okay. All right. So you have this near-death experience. Again, we outlined what happened with your buddy. You guys took the supplement, Dairy Queen, ambulance ride. But okay, so you go out to lunch with this guy that saved your life. I
Yeah.
was kind of curious about this rookie. Like he had said, "Hey, I don't really feel. I just felt like there's maybe something I could do." Did you get any indication of where he was at in his own personal life, like spiritually, or was he
Yeah.
just
So he was a pretty religious guy, a Christian. He didn't consider himself religious, but he was like an active churchgoer. He went to
okay?
church every Sunday. In fact, he had a job at his church as well. So yeah, so I would say he's like a fairly active churchgoer for sure. But
Cool.
he wouldn't call himself like religious type of guy. But to him, he was just an active, engaged in his religion for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. All right. So in your near death experience in your book, you kind of start outlining some of these different principles, excuse me, that you learn um from this guide that you get. Um
Hmm.
in that very first one with this guide, well, man, I feel like we've got such limited time for where we could dive in.
I
So
know.
but how about this? Maybe just yeah, maybe we'll start there with this guide. What did this guide look like? What was that encounter like? Because I feel like we'd be cheating our audience if we didn't kind of
Yeah.
introduce
Well,
them.
to kind of lead us on the way how I got there is I saw that they revived the body. As soon as I saw that, I felt really bad about it. I started to get a negative life review on all the bad things I ever did, quickly followed by all the good that I ever did. And right as soon as I got done with that positive life review, I noticed this warmth coming from behind me. So I turned around and I see my guide, and he had, was an older man, long white hair, long white beard, just piercing eyes that could look through you. That felt like they could look through your soul. And he introduced himself as Drake, even though I thought he was God. He introduced himself as Drake and that he was my guide to help me go wherever I wanted to go. And he explained I could go anywhere that I want to go in the whole universe. And I knew that this love, this tremendous power that was coming through him, I knew it was the greatest thing I ever felt. So I wanted to go wherever that came from. And he explained that that was from my home, from his home, my home, all of our home. And so he explained that we could go there, we could go home. But he also explained that everything in life has a resonant frequency, everything, including us. And that if I wanted to go home, I would have to raise my frequency. And and he essentially explained that that frequency is our love energy. And he would help me raise that love energy while I learned a few principles, and I wouldn't have to fully embrace them. I would just have to be willing to accept them as possibly true. And as long as I could accept them as possibly true, then we could keep moving on. And that's how we began our principle journey, where I learned literally 10 principles.
Okay, so you didn't have to fully embrace them, but you had to that have the idea that they possibly could be true.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to accept that they could be true.
Yeah, I mean, I like that the grace that's offered there. It's like you don't have to accept it as absolute truth, but you have to accept it that it could possibly be true. I feel like
Yeah.
there's a nice level of grace where it's like, I think like maybe a parent, raising a teenager, it's like there's these rules here, and I'm asking that you kind of come along with me, and you don't have to, go with everything I say, but you need to kind of walk with me a little bit and explore it. Okay, really cool.
Yeah.
Great. So do you want to just dive into some of these principles, or we can do all?
Yeah. So
You just get
we could
started.
do all we could do all 10 if you like. Just do them
Sure.
really quick. The first thing I thought was going to be love, and he said no, it's not love. The first thing is actually authenticity. and that we can't actually truly be loved or love anyone else until we find out who we really are. And so authenticity is the paramount foundation for our spirit or our soul. So I had to really learn who I was, deep down who I was. And then the second principle was to, once I could figure out who I was, like deep within my soul who I was, then I needed to understand the purpose of our life on Earth School. And he did refer to Earth as an Earth School, and that the purpose that we're here is just to learn and to get better at making decisions. And that's all we're here to do, is to learn, get better about making decisions. And one of the greatest things that we have for helping us do that is our love that we carry and love that we feel from others. So the relationships that we build become more important than any career, more important than any car or income. Those relationships become eternally important because we carry those relationships with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third principle was love everyone, that we are supposed to love everyone, and truly everyone, from the hero to the villain. We're supposed to love everyone. And I felt, I didn't have a problem with that at all. And he explained that if we can really open our heart to love everyone, then we're opening our heart to receive God's voice. And that was the fourth principle, is we have an inner voice, all of us do. And that inner compass or that inner voice comes from God. And it's kind of like God's spiritual DNA that he puts in all of us. And if we want to, we can activate it and listen to it.
Okay, so
And then yeah.
yeah, well, real quick, like as a lot of our viewers are probably watching, they're thinking to themselves, about life after death and what we need to do to kind of attain a certain level of glory or be in God's presence. We've got all of these world religions, right? At any point in time during your conversations with Drake, were you getting certain knowledge where it's like, hey, look, it doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot what people are on this earth as long as they're progressing, or what was that like? Or do you have
So
any
I did,
there?
I thought for sure I could just get into heaven. I was an active Christian when I had died. And I felt like if I was fully embodying my Christian principles, then I should be able to just get in like the back door of heaven, like a VIP door of heaven. And Drake, I actually had that thought, like, is there some special door for us Christians? And he was like, he loved that I was that excited about it, but he explained that every one of us is on our own individual journey with
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
every single one of us. And that those journeys are not about throwing away souls. Those journeys are about saving souls at every level possible.
At
And so
every
there's
level
there's
possible. What do you mean by that? Are you saying like in
and
this life and in the next, or what do you
the
mean?
way so, so the way he explained it to me is he helped me understand that if I'm a good father, as a human imperfect father, if I'm a good father and I have 100 children, how many of them am I willing to throw away to really save the others? And I'm like, none. I'll try to save all of them. And that's the love of a human father. And he explained that our creator, if we want to call him or her our father slash mother in heaven, doesn't matter. Our creator, our God, who created all of us, is far greater than the love that a human can have.
Mm-hmm.
And if me, being a human father, could never throw away even one of my children, then that's the way God is too, and even stronger. And the way that is God has a specific path for every single one of us,
Yeah.
and that none of us are being thrown away. If we're being thrown away at all, it's by us. It's mentally, and it's by us only. God's
Yeah.
not doing that to us. We're kind of pushing ourselves away from God. Yeah.
I like that. I'm so big on grace and God's love and mercy. Um, that I'm always saying that. I'm saying that God created a plan of salvation, not a plan of damnation or condemnation.
Yep.
And you just, yeah, I mean, in your book, I continuously got that. And the amount of love that's offered and the amount of light and the amount of goodness and forgiveness. Um, you know, however, what do you say to the people that are like, okay, that's all fine and dandy, Vinny, but what about the justice component of it? Like God is merciful, but there's also justice. What do you say to them?
So there is justice, but the justice is energetic, meaning that if we do harm, we will eventually have to pay a price for that harm. But it's not a price that we would necessarily understand on earth. But there's a price to be paid for everything negative that we do. But here's what's really great: everything positive we ever do helps wipe away a lot of that. And
Hmm.
if we live a fairly positive life, then we can hopefully wipe away most of that. And any suffering that's going to be there is going to only be internal. But the only hell that I ever saw in the whole experience was an internal hell, a hell that we create inside of ourselves, not a real place that God is, stashing away souls for a certain amount of time. But I did see people experiencing a hell, but that was in their own mind, in their own consciousness.
Yeah.
That was not something being put on them. They were putting themselves in that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And I know you'd mentioned that in your book, and I've read a couple other near-death experience books. And I imagine you may have read them too. Have you read Return from Tomorrow?
Yes. Yeah. I've read Return from Tomorrow. Yeah.
And this, I read that like 20 years ago, but I remember in this man's account, he's talking about individuals that were like addicted to alcohol or something like that. If I remember correctly, he recalled these spirits that were like trying to sit down at bars and like take over
Yep.
drinks. And
Yeah.
it,
So sometimes when a spirit crosses over, it doesn't cross over. So a spirit may die, the body may die and the spirit is let go or let free. And that spirit doesn't want to go towards any light, doesn't want to go towards any love. It wants to keep experiencing things on earth. And so you may see those spirits, haunting or trying to, get high or get drunk by possessing people that are getting high or getting drunk. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So the only experience like that I could say as hell though is something that we would potentially create for ourselves, not something that's created outside ourselves. Yeah. But that got me to the next principle, which is, after listening to your inner voice, I was taught to use technology responsibly, and that if I wasn't careful, that technology would replace God for me. And is that going to be everyone's story? No, but I think it could be most of our story. I really do. There's a certain sense that technology is giving you all the answers now. And in generations past, when people had mysteries and they had questions, they would turn to God for their answers. And now just everyone turns to Google. They turn to their whatever, YouTube or whatever, to get all their answers.
I
And so
think this,
they're not really plugging into God anymore.
yeah, I think the scripture is if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of Google. No,
Yeah,
I think I got it
that's right.
wrong.
It's God who who giveth all men free, liberally, right, or
Yeah.
freely. And it's crazy that we've come into a generation where, uh, you know, even when we have a personal question, a personal mystery, we go to technology first. We don't go to God anymore. And in a way, that's not a good thing. And I was taught that we have to learn to have a good, responsible relationship with technology and understand that it can try to replace God if we allow it. But we don't need to allow it. We can allow it to enhance our relationship with God. We don't have to allow it to take away our relationship with God or to replace it. So yeah, I was taught, even though this was back in 2003, I was taught, that technology was in its baby stages.
Yeah.
But yet I was taught very strictly, like, technology is very important for us to learn to have a strong positive relationship with technology. And that's when I was taught, essentially, a principle called the hour of power, which is, the first 30 minutes when we wake up and the last 30 minutes before we go to bed, whatever we're putting in that specific spot, that ends up becoming our religion.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're putting, sports or stocks or finance times, or we're putting entertainment in that spot, that becomes literally our God, who we worship. But we can
Yeah.
also put things that are uplifting and things that help connect us closer to our Creator. And that's what I highly encourage people to do, is use your hour of power to connect you to your Creator, not to push you away. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And you talk a little bit also about that in your book where you talk about focus, right? Like if we're have something negative happen in our lives and we dwell on that, then that's going to consume us, right? And I think you
Mm-hmm.
hit the nail on the head too, where you're saying, hey, are we focused so much about stocks, about sports, about entertainment,
Or
addiction?
news.
Oh my gosh,
News is
yes.
a big one for people right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, if it bleeds, it leads. So, every once in a while,
Yep.
I'll catch the very end of a game, and then they'll cut right to the news, and it's like news, three dead and drive-by shooting, and blah blah blah, and car accident, da da da, dead. Like, if that's what you're, constantly getting, fed, what do you think is going to consume your soul? So, I'll just share this quick experience. I turned 40 last week, and I got some bad news from a friend, and I don't think they expected it to be bad news, but you know, long story short, I could have dwelled on this moment, or I could have not, and I decided that I was going to listen to some uplifting music, some religious music, instrumental music, and slowly through the course of the day, got the bad news, but I replaced that with with the good stuff, and was able to have a better rest of the day, and move forward and move past that. So okay, cool. So we are past principle 4. Now we're on to
Mm-hmm.
principle 5.
Yeah. So 5 was the use technology responsibly.
Oh,
And
that's
then six after that is to release all prejudice. And that one I thought was really easy for me. I was raised in a biracial family. So I felt, with my Korean sisters and me being Caucasian, that I understood prejudice and that I was not prejudiced at all. And that's when Drake showed me. Uh, he said, Vinny, I love that you're not prejudiced, but what do you feel about prejudiced people? And I went off. I told him, I said, they're horrible. I can't believe that they are creations of God. I think that they're the worst part of humanity. And he showed me, as I was speaking, he showed me being lifted away from the rest of us over to the prejudice team. And that my prejudice towards prejudiced people was a prejudice, and that I couldn't even hold prejudice towards prejudiced people. And that's a little complicated, but very, when you think about it, it's very real. And it makes sense that I shouldn't have prejudice even towards prejudiced people. And so I was given kind of a day in the shoes of someone who is prejudiced that I knew. And I saw very easily why they believed what they did about certain people. Um, and it wasn't an explanation whatsoever, but it was a moment of empathy. It was a moment to understand that there's a lot behind everyone's journey
yeah,
of where they are in this life. And it's not my job to judge their journey. It's
yeah,
my job to love them and hopefully love them out of their prejudice. And I was shown that you can love people out of their prejudice.
hmm.
You can prove to them that their prejudice is wrong by loving them, not by protesting them, not by putting signs on their front yard, but by truly loving them, caring for them, and serving them. And the world is going to have a hard time with that, and they do, because
Yeah,
the world thinks you do the opposite. But here's the thing: um, we are not we are not going to grow as victims. We will only grow as victorious energy, overcoming our weaknesses, overcoming those things that make us a victim. And we will never grow, ever. In fact, we will only um, uh, ruin our growth or be anti-growth as we find ways to be victims.
Oh
That's
man,
it.
I love
There's no way
that.
to grow our soul and be a victim. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
so and essentially that was the next, after prejudice, I had to understand um, the power of creation, and how we create in this life is with our thoughts. And it's so important for us to use positive thoughts to create positive things. And that if we use negative thoughts, we will create negative things. And if I want to think negative all day long, I will attract negative, even if I'm a really good person. If I think negative all day long, I will attract negative. And that comes back to that victim nature. If I think victim thoughts, I will find more opportunities to be a victim. But if I think victorious thoughts, if I think loving thoughts, I will find more opportunities for love. And that's what this is all about, is us figuring out how to use our magic wands, and our magic wands of creation are our thoughts.
hmm.
We can really wave our magic wands and create anything in this life. And it starts with just our thoughts, something so basic and simple as our thoughts. And if that's the power of our creation, that leads me to the next principle, that if that's the power of creation, our thoughts, how important is it for us to avoid negative influences? Because if we have negative influences, whether they be people, whether they be entertainment or social media, those negative influences will impact us because they will impact our thoughts. So, avoiding negative influences was the eighth principle, which brought me to the ninth principle, that there's purpose even in evil. That if to take away the wrong choice is to take away our ability to choose. So, yes, there's purpose even in evil, that we have to have the ability to choose. If we could only choose good, then there would be no reason to be here. And that's why we're here. We're here to make choices, to learn how to make choices. And sometimes our worst choices can be our best learning opportunities if we learn from them. If we don't learn from them, then chalk it up as a big mistake.
Yeah,
But if we learn from it, it's actually a great opportunity for learning. And that
yeah,
led me to the 10th principle, which is we are all one. All of us, we are all one. Every single one of us are fingers on God's hands. All of us. And for me, the thumb, to hate the pinky is to only hate myself. For me, the thumb, to want to hurt the forefinger is only to want to hurt myself. And that anytime I exert negative energy outwardly towards another, I'm only exerting that energy to myself, because God's hand is our core. That's all of us, our core. And that's what connects us all together. So we are all fingers on God's hand. And that's when I was also taught the power of the pointed finger. And the power of the pointed finger is, if I'm pointing my finger at something, I'm saying, yes, that person is so bad. When you turn that hand backwards, you see three more fingers pointing backwards towards myself. So there's no way to put anything negative on anyone else without taking on three times that negative energy on oneself. But what's beautiful about that is, if I say compliments and I say uplifting things, I will be uplifting myself. I will be complimenting myself without being egotistical about it. I
yeah,
can compliment myself by complimenting others. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I love that. Just being cheerleaders for other people. I mean,
Yep.
I love yeah. I mean, for example, like I'll compliment people's teeth, their smile, their clothing, their hair, their glasses, whatever it is. And, people can take that however they want. They may think, oh, this guy's hitting on me or whatever. It's like, no, I'm actually just being genuine. And I legitimately thought I'd pay you a nice compliment. But, yeah, it's like, I think the quote says compliments, they're free. What is it? They're free to give, and may mean nothing to you, but may mean everything to somebody else. Something like that.
Yeah.
Cost nothing to give, but mean everything to someone else. I don't know, something to that effect. Okay, so here you are, like almost 21 years removed from your near death experience, your life changing experience, and I know in your book you talk about having to come back to this body and feeling claustrophobic and just kind of wanting to go back. Um, what are some like challenges maybe that you have faced where in the last 21 years where you needed to love everybody, you needed to be authentic, you needed to, not be judgmental, you needed to not be prejudiced, and you needed, is there some moments I'm sure in the last 21 years where you're like, okay, I got to take in principle number 4, or Drake said dot dot dot. Anything that
Yeah.
comes to
It
mind?
there's tons of opportunities that I've had in those 21 years to better exemplify what I was taught for sure. And I'm human, and so I do make mistakes. Most of us do. And one of the hardest things for me is to give myself grace. It is. It's really hard for me to do that. And I don't know why. I think that's just part of how I was raised, I guess. But it's way easier for me to give grace to others than it is myself.
Mm.
So I'm learning that better as I at least give myself as much grace as I give others. But I have found it's quite hard to live after an experience like this, because now there's no need of faith. Now a lot of what you needed faith for before is now knowledge. And now if you make a mistake, you knowingly are making mistakes. Not, you can't claim, well, my faith was shaken and so I made a mistake. If I make a mistake, I have to fully understand um, and fully understand the ramifications, the energy that's happened with the mistake. So, and I have to understand it because I went to heaven. I went and I saw heaven. I actually saw that place we call home, or I call home. I got to see that place that is so beautiful and so tremendously full of love. Every little speck of energy there is so full of love for us, and we need to translate that love down to earth, because earth is a copy of heaven. And so we can make earth like heaven, and eventually we will. Eventually we'll make earth like heaven.
Hmm. Yeah, at the end of your book, you kind of mentioned like you had seen so much more about like the future. And it almost had me thinking like, here comes the sequel, right? What can you tell us about that, like from your experience?
Well, I got to see what the future of earth looks like, and that's not in the near future. It's quite a bit of a distant future. We're nothing like how we are now. Consumerism has finally washed away. And it's almost like we had to receive a baptism of fire to wash away consumerism. And consumerism is what we are in right now. Everybody's a consumer. They consume everything. They consume content. They consume resources. They consume, and very few people are building or creating.
Yeah.
But we were built to be the opposite. We were built to be creators, not consumers. And the reason why we consume so much is because we were born into a prison cell of consumption. And one of the reasons why people are so unhappy today is because they can consume all they want, but it's not going to give eternal happiness. It's not going to give you true everlasting happiness. True everlasting happiness comes from creating, not from consuming. And that's hard because we were built to create, but yet we're in this world of consumption.
Yeah.
And so the future we create. We create for each other. We create for ourselves. We create for our families. Even families look different there. Buildings look different there. The entire society is structured differently, and very different from the way it is now. Very different.
I'm just smiling because I have all these questions going through my head, and I know all of our listeners will too. They're like, families look different, buildings look different. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but I love how you said, "Hey, we create for each other." And if I remember, like in the beginning of the Bible, God, he basically says like he's a creator. He's like, "Hey, here I created both heaven and earth. And then we're gonna create divide the light from the dark and the matter and the animals, and then so he's a creator, and it makes perfect sense that we need to do more creating and less consuming. That's one of the reasons I love
Mm-hmm.
these interviews that I get to do, because I'm able to learn more, and I feel like we're building something, and we're you're able to give off your knowledge and from your experience. um Hmm. And then, I think of the scripture, it talks about that we are not commanded to do good, or that we shouldn't be uh, commanded to do good in all things, that we should be active and by our own free will and choice, do good, to choose good and to lift. Um, okay, well, so we talked about the principles. Maybe if you will, just dive in real quick about what how you came back to life. We didn't get there yet.
Well, I was in heaven, got the whole heaven experience, and that would take hours just to talk about just that. But while I was there, Drake gave me a hug, and the hug that he gave me was just extremely powerful. It was as far as God's love for me as one of God's creations. And I felt the tremendous love of my creator coming through Drake. And I felt how this love was being poured upon me without reason, that there wasn't like something special I did to receive it. And in fact, this love is being given openly and freely to all of us. It just so happened that Drake was able to be there to channel it to me as he gave me this hug. And I was feeling the power and the strength of that love that God has for all of us when I heard my brother's voice, my brother on earth, and he was giving my body a special prayer or a special blessing. And he commanded my body to be made whole. Um, and at that point, he closed the blessing with an amen. I felt instantaneously I was forced. I was taken away from heaven. And I felt like I was ripped out of heaven and I was forced back into my body. My brother had said this blessing around 10 p.m. and I woke up in my body at 1:11 in the morning. I had been I'd been brain dead for 3 days. So this was on the 21st. I went in the hospital in the ambulance and revived me on January 18th in the morning. And then I exited that hospital the morning of the 21st. I woke up the morning of the 21st. I proceeded to, go through a whole battery of tests to make sure that I could leave on my own recognizance. Because I felt like I was fine. I felt totally fine. The neurologist felt like it was a fluke, that I was going to go back into my coma at any moment. He thought that I was just having a lucid day or a lucid hour or two. But after about 3 hours, he finally admitted, he's like, you know what? You're quite lucid. You can remember a lot of things that people don't remember. Now, I wasn't telling anybody about my experience.
Yeah.
That didn't happen until later. I had to get very comfortable with someone before I tell them about my experience. And yeah, and in fact, for the next 7 months after my experience, I thought it was possible that my experience was a delusion. I thought it was possible. I didn't know, but I thought it was possible. I had the voice of doctors in my head saying that my brain was making things up while it was starved of oxygen, and that
Yeah.
I had to be careful. I had to be careful of what my imagination made up. And so I was living that way for the first 7 months. But just shortly after I had my experience, I met an amazing woman who is now my wife. And as I met her, she helped me kind of reconnect to my own family. And part of that process was to be at a family reunion in Wyoming, of all places. And while we were at this reunion, we went to the high school and saw a presentation on the history of this little town in Wyoming. And up, wouldn't you know it, comes a picture of Drake on the slideshow.
Picture of
Like
Drake.
larger than life,
So,
it's a picture of Drake. And but here's the mystery. It said his name was Charles. It didn't say his name was Drake, but it said his last name. His name was Charles Kazare. So I went ahead and I went directly to my grandmother's house. She was a Kazare before she got married. And so I asked her, as soon as I walked through that door, I was like, Grandma, tell me about Charles Kazare. And her exact response was, oh, you mean great grandpa Drake? He's kind of famous in our family. And after that, I just started weeping because now I had concrete proof, something that I had never learned before, was now being given to me as kind of a nugget of truth for me to understand that my guide all along was my great 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 grandfather on my grandmother's side. And what a blessing that was, that I got to see that later. I don't think I could have handled it until I was a few months out after the experience. But there I got my first strong confirmation that what I experienced was not some type of delusion, but was an actual event,
Yeah.
and an actual experience, because my imagination could not have made up the picture or the imagery or the live imagery of all that I went through.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I was so impressed with your book was like, it's just so remarkably detailed and vivid. Your conversations, like, it's almost like you went on this trip, had a remarkable experience, and then you came back and you were recounting to all your friends, "Hey, I went to Hawaii. I met this great
Yeah.
person, and I'm using an analogy here, but clearly, like, it made an indelible impression on your soul that you came back with so much more. It was not just like a good time on a Hawaiian vacation. It was something deeper. It was spirit to spirit. And, you're able to recount so much of it. Real quick, you were talking about, you came back and the veil, it seemed like was still pretty thin. Like you could still interpret some things that were going on in people's lives around you. You
Yeah.
share the story about how you had gone to the psychologist. The psychologist, again, like you said, felt like you were, hallucinating, and then he referred you to the psychiatrist. And then would you mind sharing with us a little bit more about that experience with the psychologist and what
Yeah.
you
So with the I call him head shrinker, with the head shrinker, with the head doctor, I went to go see him to see if what I was really having happen was some type of delusion or schizophrenia. And he did diagnose me with kind of a classification of some type of schizophrenia slash um, um, some type of classification where, I was hearing voices that no one else was hearing, and I was seeing things that no one else was seeing. So he said it was like a borderline delusional schizophrenic, but I was also functional, and I wasn't doing anything with those things. But at the same time, as he was writing me three prescriptions, this older woman came forward, and she flat out told me that she was his grandmother and wanted me to deliver this message to him. And my own guide told me, he's like, "Yeah, you got to do this." And my ego is like, "No, I'm not going to do this. He already thinks I'm crazy. He's going to end up writing out two more prescriptions if I do this." And they said, and both of them said, "No, you've got to do this before you take those prescriptions from him. Make sure you deliver this message." So I went out on a limb, and it was a total gamble to do this. I went out on a limb and I told him, I said, "Hey, there's this older woman here. She says she's like a grandmother type figure for you. And she has this message. She wants to remind you." And she went ahead and expressed to me about a 15-second message. That's it, 15 seconds. I delivered that message. This doctor's eyes
we
went
got to
as wide
know.
as
We got to
saucers.
know what the
Yeah.
message is.
So it was something about, it was a trauma that he was being, there was a predator in his life, and grandma saved him from a predator as a young boy. And he was quite young. He was like around five-ish, I think. Either 4 or 5 years old when she caught what was going on, and she stopped it. She stopped it cold, and it never happened again.
Yeah.
And so she became kind of his hero. She became kind of his superwoman to save him from this. And the hard part is he did not remember it, but me telling him that, he remembered it. But his entire life he had blocked it. But as I said it to him, and I said it exactly how she told me to say it, he was able to reconnect the dots. And he felt that that was the reason he got in the medical field, especially the mental health field, was to help others go through what he didn't know that he went through.
Yeah, I know
Um,
trauma, trauma can make it so you forget parts of your history, right? And clearly that sounds
yeah.
like that's what happened with him. Um,
But
okay.
what and the way he reacted is he kicked me out of his office.
Yeah, I
He
was just
just
gonna
said
go
he
there.
said he said get the F out of my office. And so I was like, okay. So I left, and just a few minutes later he called me, and he called me on my cell phone. I picked up, and he said, Vinny, I don't know what you have. My medical treatment doesn't give me any resources for you, but you've got to learn how to trust this. He said that everything that I said was true. And he actually recommended that I go meet with clergy. He said you should go meet with your bishop about this, and he's going to give you better guidance than he would. And
Hmm.
so I did. I actually ended up going meeting with my clergy about that, and had some awesome discussions there. Yeah.
Oh man, that is so amazing. So did anything ever more evolve from that, or was that kind of like, hey, I shared the message I was supposed to share with you. He took with it what he did. He later apologized, calls you. Is that kind of relationship, was that just closed, or do
That
you know?
was it. Yeah, that was it. Never went to him again. And he explained to me that all the resources and training and education he had did not give him anything that he could help me with.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
because here's the thing, he's trained to deal with people that are hallucinating or delusional, truly delusional, not listening to spirits. And the especially the mental health field, they don't, at least at the time, they didn't even recognize people as being empaths or being spiritually intuitive. They just thought all of it was some type of psychoses, some
yeah.
type of mental disorder. Yeah.
How often is this happening to this, or is it still happening to this day? Because I know in your book you mention the homeless man that's walking down the street and you order him a meal because you were told by your guide, I believe, Drake had mentioned he will be coming by and he'll come into the restaurant. You're eating lunch
Yeah.
with a friend and you order two meals and your friend's like, wow, you sure are hungry. So how often is this happening for you?
So it happens really regularly, really regularly. In fact, with what I do for a living is I help people with my intuition. I actually help them kind of get through their own hurdles of life. I work as a life coach, also as um, someone who helps with motivation and helps with healing specific forms of mental energy or spiritual energy on someone. So I help people kind of navigate their own life, and in doing so, I use my intuition. I use my spirit connection daily, every single day.
Hmm.
And in doing so, it's an awesome thing, but it's a scary thing too, because sometimes things are coming up that no one would want to tell anyone else in the world. And so there's a way to navigate that in a healthy way, and there's a way to navigate that in an unhealthy way. And I've learned to navigate that in a very healthy way.
Okay. Well, we are running a little bit short on time. So you and I are both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You served a mission in Cambodia. I served a mission in Los Angeles. We have taught the truths that we know, that we've been taught, and gained confirmation of through the Holy Spirit, and also using our mind and so forth. So, I read your story, and it's super validating, and I love the components of your story where you're saying, "Hey, focus on goodness, replace negative with light." Um, and all these other things, being authentic, there's like kind of like truth that we had been taught growing up. What do so it's great to see this story that validates our beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is your testimony of and your witness of like temple work and the Book of Mormon? How has your experience influenced and strengthened, bolstered your testimony of what we believe to be the restored gospel of Jesus Christ?
Well, it's certainly helped me understand why we do what we do. A lot of times we think we know why we're doing things, but that's not the real reason we're doing it. The real reason is much deeper than what we could understand, and that includes everything that we do in the church. Um, but one thing that really stood out to me from my experience is that even with all of the truths and principles that we have access to through the church, we still only have the very tip of the iceberg. And that as the water recedes and we get more of that eternal knowledge, a lot of the things that we're doing will change. A lot of the things that we have done will change or end, and we'll start doing new things. But just the same way as the church has progressed over the years,
Yeah.
from the very beginning. But the most beautiful thing to me is the big thing that I learned is that my path is not everyone else's path.
Yeah.
And that's a little different than the way I thought as a missionary. I thought my path is everyone else's path, and that's the path of God. And it's quite different than that now. I understand that every single one of us here on earth is a divine masterwork, that God created every single one of us, and that God looks at us as a true masterwork of divinity. And even in our worst day, God loves us so much. There's not any big mistake we can make to make God love us less. But there's also not any super great good deed that we could do to make God love us more. That the whole temporal love structure of do good, get love, do bad, get cursing, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. God is loving us always, consistently and constantly. And if we have trials and obstacles, it's not because of something we did. It's because we essentially, most of us chose our trials and obstacles. And it was something that we felt at the time before we came here, that would help better us on our spiritual growth while we're on this journey at Earth School. But it has completely changed my belief and my relationship with God through all of that. That now I don't see God up there with a gavel in a judge's gown. I see God up there as my cheerleader and wanting me to do good. And when I make mistakes, or I have a mistake, God's up there like, you can do it, keep going. God's not up there, you're bad. And it's weird because even though through the church we don't necessarily teach that, the culture of the church does. And that's where we get it wrong, is everybody is precious to God, every single being.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the scripture in Doctrine and Covenants where it says that the worth of each soul is great in the sight of God. And I
Yes.
believe that 110%. I mean, when I was a missionary and to this day, I still talk to people all the time, and I try to offer them, some of the light and truth that we have, and I invite them to church not because like I feel like it's well, I actually do feel like it's the best thing, but just because I want to give a little bit of this recipe that I've been given, that I've enjoyed and I've devoured, on a regular basis. I want to give that to other people. And if they don't dig this recipe, that's okay. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Like you had
And
said, they're on their own journey.
that's exactly. And that's one of the most beautiful things for you to go out there and share that. You're trying to share your light and your love. And there's no harm ever in doing that, because you're only going to be an influence of positive, an influence of good. It's just those people out there that they'll go and Bible bash, or they'll go and debate certain religions, and that's not God's energy. It's
Yeah.
not.
Oh, I love it. Well, Vinney, I'm so glad that you were able to make time for us and come on the show today. I really appreciate you. I hope to visit with you again in the future. For those that are watching, and let's say they'd love to get some coaching from you, how can our audience get in touch with you?
So they can essentially get contact with me at livinggodslight.com. I have a nonprofit there, and actually all of the coaching goes through the nonprofit. What we're doing with our nonprofit is we're helping people access spiritual education no matter what religion they have, so that they can build a stronger connection with their divinity, with their believed divinity. We help them build that connection, and get that stronger connection for any type of lifestyle, whatever. We can help people. And so it's important for everyone to know really how important they are to God. And that's what we do at our nonprofit. So yeah, it's called livinggodslight.com.
Okay. Well, I fully support that. I am a big believer that we all are, again, great in the sight of God. And one scripture that came to my mind as you were speaking earlier was, I think it's Matthew 7:11. And it says, if you being evil can give good gifts, how much more so can your Father in heaven give good gifts to them that ask, or something to that effect. And here we are approaching the holiday season, and there's many great gifts to be given. And I would, on a temporal note, this is one of them. So The Light After Death, check it out if you guys get the opportunity. Vinney, you are a stud. I really appreciate you and coming on, and God bless you and your family. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Josh. It was awesome to meet you, and it was great to chat, brother.
Real quick, I want to say thank you for tuning in, and also ask for a favor. If you enjoyed the show, I'd ask that you would hit the subscribe button. It helps us scale the guests, it helps us grow the production. And if you really enjoyed it, please consider donating to the show by finding me on Venmo at Josh-Pratt. That's at JOSH-PRATT. I will repay your kind gesture by making sure that this show gets better and better. Thank you so much.